Statseeker alerts can be triggered in response to the content of either a syslog or SNMP trap message that's been forwarded to the Statseeker server, or in response to an event record resulting from a state change such as device ping or SNMP states, interface admin or OPER status changes, or any other state or status change. Event records are automatically created by Statseeker. You don't need to configure anything to generate them. You just need to configure the alerts that you want to trigger in response to the event. And the final trigger is another type of event record, a threshold breach. In this instance, you need to configure both the threshold and the alert. And there's a separate video looking at threshold configuration. Thresholds can be set against any time series metric. Think link utilization and data rates, temperatures, CPU and memory loads, that sort of thing. The alert that Statseeker generates can be in the form of an email, or a syslog message that the Statseeker server sends on to a collector, or Statseeker can run a script, allowing Statseeker's alerting functionality to accomplish any multi-step, complex task or integrate into a third-party product and use within your organization. There's an additional option, sending a webhook from Statseeker containing the alert details. This option is licensed separately to the core Statseeker product, so you may need to contact Statseeker customer services to update your license and enable the feature. Webhook alerting is discussed in detail in a separate video. Alright, let's look at configuring alerts. We head to Administration, Alerting and Event Management, Alerting, and add a new alert. The first option is the alert template. This is the output of the alert. Do you want to send an email, forward a syslog message, run a script, or send a webhook? We'll start with the simple email template. Name your alert. We'll start with a basic device down alert. The status is simply, is the alert enabled? You can disable an alert but maintain the configuration for later use. Also, if you're halfway through an alert configuration and you have to move on to another task, disable the alert before you save it, otherwise it'll be in place sending alerts based on your partial configuration. The alert type is the input for the alert, what's going to trigger the alert. From what we mentioned earlier, we have events, that's your infrastructure state and status change events, syslog and SNMP trap message content, and threshold breaches. Now, the data type. We have the common data types. This will be the same across all servers, and the second section we see here is a dynamic list based on what your server's monitoring, so yours may look a little different. For our ping down alerts, we could select device or ping. Statseeker allows for multiple ping pollers to be distributed through your network, so you can monitor availability of critical infrastructure from multiple locations. Now, when multiple pollers are available, each device has a designated default poller, but can have any number of additional pollers monitoring the device. When event type is device and field is ping state, the alert will only respond to ping state changes recorded by the default poller. If event type is ping and the field is ping state, the alert can be configured to respond to ping state changes recorded by any of the pollers, including the default poller. If you're interested in distributed polling, then you can refer to documentation and videos on Statseeker's observability appliances, or alternatively contact Statseeker sales and support for more information around the functionality. So I'm going to proceed with a data type of device and set my field to ping state and specify the states that I want to be alerted to, disabled and down. If you're ever unsure of the definition of a state, refer to the API endpoint reference for that specific data type. Let me show you. Help menu, documentation, down to the API documentation and select endpoint reference. The index is by the endpoint name, and if you're familiar with the API then you're fine, but if not, the entry that you select in the data type list in alerting is the endpoint title that we see here, so we'll search for that. I'm after the device, and we can see that the internal name is CDT device. We're after the ping state, and here are the states and their definitions. Okay, back to our alert. We have our data type, field, and state selected. Entity and group filters, I can leave the filter network wide, select a specific device or a group of devices. Next, we have a time filter, and again, I can leave it open 24/7 or restrict the alert to events that occur within a specified time range. We have the custom option here, which allows me to configure a basic time range, and an option to head off to the advanced time filter editor to create and test a complex time filter. Use this if you want to include multiple ranges and exclusions in your time filter. Again, there's documentation and video around doing each of these things if you aren't familiar with the advanced time filter editor. I'll drop in some basic business hours, and I can set up another alert for how to deal with events outside of these hours. So Monday to Friday, 6:30 AM to 6 PM. The time filter mode determines how Statseeker deals with active events at the start of a time filter period. In our case, if a device went down prior to the alerting period and was still down at the start of that period, do you want to ignore it, or do you want to be notified that it's currently down? The time zone applies to your time filter. If you have a remote office and you want to restrict the alerts to the business hours of that remote location, you can simply drop in business hours and then set the time zone with no need to calculate the time difference. The logging option can be enabled when troubleshooting alerting issues. Alerting always logs out to the Statseeker message log, but when this option is enabled, we expand on that default level of logging, and it can be a little noisy, so it's off by default. Bundling allows you to bundle up individual alert messages and send them together. This might be useful when a device goes down and you lose connectivity to everything behind it. It'll stop you being bombarded with individual alert messages. Although a better option in that event would be to use the advanced email template and enable upstream device configuration, but we'll get to that one in a little bit. And the last option is who do you want to email? Drop in an address or select a Statseeker user or a group containing Statseeker users. I can use the check event filters to apply the configuration to the content of the events database and see if any recent events satisfy this alert configuration. This is useful if you're creating an alert in response to behavior you know to be occurring, and more so when you have multiple or complex filter conditions. You can ensure that you're targeting the right events and only those events. We also have the aptly named preview test email option, which allows you to, as it says, preview a test email. It'll grab the most recent entry in the events database that would satisfy the alert configuration and previews the email that would be sent if that event occurred once this alert was in play. We have the name of the device and the state triggering the alert and the time the event occurred. We've also got an option to actually send a test alert email, and this can be used to confirm that your Statseeker email server configuration is working as intended. If you need to update something here, administration, Statseeker administration, email configuration. You can review and edit and test your email server configuration in here and see or clear the current email queue. When you're happy with the alert configuration, save it. The custom content template expands on this, allowing you to customize the email content. You get an HTML editor and the ability to format text, insert images and tables, and include links out from the alert to reports, dashboards, or external systems. You also have the option to insert variables in your email subject line and body. These variables can pass through details of the event triggering the alert, the time of the event, the name of the device, the state that triggered the alert. We've also got additional data regarding the entity responsible for the alert. In this example, we're looking at a device event, so we have access to fields for the device. If this was an interface alert, we'd have the general section and an interface section containing fields for the interface, and this list includes a link back to the parent device, so we have access to the device fields as well. And this is where previewing the test email option becomes very helpful. I've customized the content and I can preview the output. Now you can see that I've included a link to the device overview dashboard. You can also reference variables in the leak configuration to filter the dashboard content so that when the dashboard is opened, it's already filtered to the device that you want to look at. For my link configuration, I've just opened the dashboard in another tab and copied the URL, and then manually added the URL parameter to set the dashboard variable. You can see the alerting documentation for details if you aren't familiar with the syntax that we use in this situation. When bundling is in place and we're actually sending multiple alerts in a single email, the email content that features variables is repeated for each instance of the alert being triggered within the bundling period. Each table row list item or paragraph of text which includes at least one variable will be repeated. Here's an alert configuration to demonstrate this behaviour. I've enabled bundling for 10 minutes from the first instance of a trigger, and we have a table header row and a content row. The header row doesn't contain a variable, but the content row does, so the content row will be repeated for every alert. This paragraph doesn't contain a variable and won't be repeated, but this one does. Likewise with my list entries, these ones won't be repeated, this one will. I'll hit the preview and we can see how multiple events are presented when bundling alerts. We have our repeated rows, our repeated paragraph, and repeated list entries. Now, the mode option can be used to instruct the Statseeker mail server on which format to send an alert email, either HTML or raw text. Raw text will strip all the formatting, images and links. If you set mode to HTML, the server will send both HTML and raw content. And if the receiving mail client can't pass the HTML content, it'll just fall back to the raw text format. The advanced email template expands on this further. We now have multiple trigger configurations. There's a logical OR in place here. If any one of these filters is satisfied, then the alert's generated, allowing multiple triggers within a single alert configuration. The bundling option has been expanded and we now have bundle times. Let's say that this alert was to target non-critical infrastructure and set up to bundle from the end of business hours through to 6 a.m. on the next business day. So each morning I get a single email detailing all of the down events for these devices since the end of business the previous day, and all down events which occur over the weekend are bundled up for me first thing on Monday morning. The waiting policy can be used to define the action taken when device ping, device SNMP or interface OPA status events are received. Our alert configuration is targeting device ping events, so the field is available. When waiting is enabled, alerts relating to these events are delayed and only sent if the entity is still down at the end of the waiting period determined by the duration. Alternatively, we can specify a period when these events are handled differently and use the behaviour to specify that difference. Alerts are sent normally outside of the period, but don't alert on down events occurring within the period unless the device is still down at the end, or drop events outside of the waiting period, only alerting on events that occur within the window and are still active at the end of the window. Upstream devices. This uses defined network topography to suppress alerts for downstream devices when an upstream device is unreachable. Let's say a firewall at a remote office falls over. With this feature enabled, you'll only get the alert for the firewall rather than an alert for the firewall, and then additional alerts for every unreachable device behind the firewall. There's a 2-minute video which provides an overview of the upstream device feature and configuration, and there's documentation which goes into detail. Check them out if you're interested in using this feature. The next addition in the advanced template is the recipient roster. Upload a text file containing your roster, and emails for this alert will be sent to the recipients according to the roster. Syntax for the roster file is detailed in the documentation. Alerting and threshold configuration. Alerting. We've got our date and time syntax, our row syntax, and an example. Alternate date-time formats to use in the email, and these are applied to any instance of a date or time variable in the email subject or body. The other alert template options are syslog and script. So syslog, we have the same multiple filter blocks as the advanced email template. Specify the IP of the target syslog collector and your message format. We have the legacy Statseeker syslog format and a flexible JSON format. The JSON format contains all the data from the legacy Statseeker message and offers some additional configuration data for the message source device. And lastly, the script template. Drop in the command to run your shell script, including any operational parameters required. The script will be run as the server's Statseeker user account, so be sure to set appropriate file permissions for access and execution. So we've had a look at the various alerting templates and how to configure filters. The last item I want to look at is some of the variations in the alert trigger that we skipped over on our way through the templates. I'll use this script configuration. So alert type is syslog, data type is device, and we have a regex field for filtering on the incoming syslog messages for the trigger we're after. Check my filter against recent events, and I can save the alert. The SNMP trap trigger has the same configuration options as we just saw looking at the syslog trigger. When configuring alerts for threshold breaches, simply select the threshold, the breach states you want to alert on, and apply any additional filters you might want. Now remember, the filters you define in the alert will be in addition to any filters that are already applied in the threshold. You can always check event filters to ensure that you have the filters configured correctly. And that's a basic look at alert configuration in Statseeker.